Hello and welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to be talking about managing eating for children with sensory difficulties. My name is Kerry Marchant.
And I'm Alison Booth, and together we are community dietitians working across Somerset. So today we're going to cover the division of responsibility theory. We're also going to look at messy play and why it's so important in encouraging your child to eat better. And also we'll cover a little bit on food chaining as well. So the division of responsibility theory, now this is really an interesting theory, and I've taken it from the Ellen Satter Institute. And it's about taking your responsibility as a parent, and around feeding, that includes the what, where and when of feeding. So it's what you're going to feed your child, where they're going to eat, and the timings of their meals. So it is very much up to the parent to choose what food your child is going to eat and to prepare the food. Obviously, as your child gets older, then they can help with the food preparation. It's your responsibility as a parent to provide regular meals and snacks. It's your responsibility as a parent to make eating times as pleasant as you can. And also important that you don't let your child have food or drinks other than water in between their meal and snack times. And in particular, if you've got a child that likes to graze all the time, then it makes it really difficult to know, one, how much your child has eaten, and two, if they're actually hungry for their next meal or snack. And it's also important to let your child grow into their body, and that's the body that's right for them. So all children are different, and some children are going to be smaller and slimmer than others, and some children are going to be taller and they may actually carry more weight. So it's about allowing your child to grow into the body that's right for them. Now, the child's responsibility includes your child's responsibility to decide how much and whether or not they're actually going to eat the food. And this theory can be applied to every stage of your child's life, so right from toddlerhood through to adolescent. And family meals are key, really important as much as possible to try and get your child to sit around the table with the rest of the family and all eat together. And what they find is that where you have family meals, that children eat better, they feel better about themselves, and interestingly, also get along with people better. So family meals, really, really important. So to summarise, so I've talked a little bit about the division of responsibility theory, and I've also given you the website on a previous slide, so you'll be able to have a look at that website yourself. It's really important that you don't put any pressure on your child to eat. So it's okay to encourage them, but not to put pressure on them. Sometimes if you put too much pressure on children to eat and to clear their plate, then you start having other issues, such as your child starting to hide food and to be a little bit more secretive with their food than you would want them to be. Try to use positive language when you're trying new foods, and very much celebrate if new foods are tried. So you don't want to be negative around food, and also I would discourage you from talking about food all the time. Try to have a very calm, predictable mealtime schedule. So you've got timings for, say, breakfast, mid-morning snack, lunch, mid-afternoon snack, and then for your evening meal and possibly a snack before bed as well. So have timings for all of these, and also limit your times of the meals so that you're not having your child sit there for hours on end looking at a plate that there is no way that they're going to eat the food that's on there. So around 20 to 25 minutes for a main meal and about 15 minutes for a snack is ample time for them to eat.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about messy play. So if your child has any sensory issues and is very rigid around eating new foods, you might want to offer their usual food at mealtimes and then encourage messy play between meals. So this could be away from the table, away from meal times. There should be no pressure to eat these foods. Again, we want you to be positive about the food. And what you might find is really helpful is to initially start with a safe texture for your child that's usually a dry texture. This might be something like Rice Krispies. So if you put your hands or run a car through some Rice Krispies, they don't stick to your hands, they fall off. But then you might then start to move on to having slightly wet hands where you put into the Rice Krispies, then they stick. And this is just a way to move your child forward and get used to being a bit messy. You could then move along to more challenging textures. So these might be textures that your child's not so keen on eating. It might be something like pasta, that you start off dry and then you start to cook, and you could slowly increase the length of time it's cooked, so it then becomes a bit more sticky and wet. And then you want to try and encourage your child to keep their hands messy for longer and longer periods of time, and be reassuring about this mess. So you might start with just a few seconds before your child wants their hands clean. You might then count to 3 before you clean their hands, and then you might count to 5 the next time, and just increase it very, very slowly. Encouraging play with foods from each of the food groups. So this might be, we've talked about pasta and Rice Krispies. This might be something like baked beans as well. So it's just trying to get in each foods from each food group. And while you're doing this process, it might be useful to have an age-appropriate vitamin and mineral supplement.
So I'm going to cover food chaining and talk around what it is, and in particular how it can help expand your child's dietary intake. So food chaining is about making very small or very subtle changes to your child's accepted foods. And it doesn't involve any hiding of food or switching packets. So as an example, I often have parents say, I put a different cereal, so a regular cornflakes, into their usual branded cornflakes packet, and then try to see whether or not their child will have it. Food chaining is not about that. It's about being very much open and honest with your child, and it's not about force feeding them. Okay, so your child has got to know everything that's going on, and they've got to be on board with it, because they've got to trust that with food chaining, it's about increasing the variety of foods in their diet. So some of the small ways that you can help encourage your child to accept the food. So as an example, you might want to cut the sandwiches into a different shape. So that would be your child's normal sandwich filling, but instead of cutting it, say, into squares, you might cut it into triangles. You might cut some animal shapes using some cutters. Or alternatively, you might put the food onto a different plate, or if they will only eat off a certain plate, you might try and put a sticker on that preferred plate or cup. So this can not just be about food, it can be about drinks as well. And it's important to eat that food in a different way. So you would take it out of the packet and you might want to put it on a plate. So instead of eating crisps out of a crisp packet, you might put them in a bowl or onto a plate. Other things that you can do with food chaining is you can change the temperature. So again, it's the same food. So instead of having a yogurt stick that you would take out of the fridge, you might want to freeze it and see if they will have it, having changed the temperature to freezing it. Also, you might want to make a warm chocolate drink rather than having a chocolate milkshake. And it's really important that you only make really small changes and move on once your child is accepting this change and is comfortable with that change. So food chaining is also around trying different foods that look a little bit similar. Now, some of these are massive jumps, but they may lead on to other things. So a food chain doesn't necessarily have to go in this line. It could be something completely different. But as an example, if they will eat potato waffles, then they may be more accepting of other potato-based products. So things like potato smiley faces. And if they're accepting of that, they may take potato hash browns. And eventually you can start to introduce very small roast potatoes and then potato cakes, and eventually a mashed or a boiled potato. And it's really important that you offer any new food alongside the existing food. So for example, if your child said they wanted to try a potato smiley face and they normally eat potato waffles, then they might have a half or a quarter of a potato smiley face, and then the rest of their meal is a potato waffle. So it's all about increasing the amount of the new food that your child is offered. This is another example of food chaining. So could be chicken nuggets to turkey dinosaurs to fish fingers to breaded chicken goujons, and eventually some small pieces of cooked chicken. However, before you get through this chain, you may find that if your child will only accept McDonald's chicken nuggets, then you might want to try then a Kentucky Fried Chicken or another shop that you might have in your town. So you might want to try that to start with before you move on to something that you would buy in the supermarket, a supermarket chicken nugget, before your child will then accept something like a turkey dinosaur. Okay, so the food chains, you may need to have very much baby steps initially. And again, with different biscuits or crackers, breadsticks. So some of these foods your child may well already accept. So if they'll accept some of these textures, you might want to try other foods that have got similar textures. Be led by your child and encourage them to go shopping with you so that they can pick things that they might like to try. Really important to keep them involved with the whole process. Similarly, if your child will eat pizza, so pizza generally has a tomato sauce in it or on the top, and if your child will accept that, then they may be more accepting of having a tomato sauce that you might be able to put onto pasta eventually. So initially they may take it alongside the pasta, they may dip the pasta in the tomato sauce, but eventually you want to move to trying to put the tomato sauce on top of their pasta. And it's really important that you take your time, you're patient, you're encouraging, and only persevere if your child isn't becoming too anxious. This should all be very much child-led. And it's also worth bearing in mind that children who've got autism or sensory processing disorder or ARFID, which is an avoidant restricted food intake disorder, that all of these processes will be much, much slower and they'll be much more difficult to progress, but it is important that you keep going. And all of the research shows us that children are much more likely to accept food that they are offered time and time again. So for Somerset patients as well, they can ring our Paediatric Integrated Therapy Service helpline for further advice. And I've given you the telephone number there and the opening times.
So in summary, we have talked about having set times for meals and snacks. So that's about 25 minutes for a main meal or 15 minutes for a snack. Avoid giving the same foods over and over again. We call this food jagging. So maybe only offer the same food for a maximum of 3 days in a row and then try a different food. Keep offering previously rejected foods. So it might take up to 25 times of offering this food before your child accepts this food. And do this alongside some of their favourite foods. Try some messy play, so encouraging your child to pick up a new food, to smell it, to touch it, and eventually taste it. And again, try this away from meal times. We've talked in detail about food chaining, so this is offering a small amount of a new food and then gradually building it up. And offer these foods in discussion with your child, so there should be no secrets about this process. And reward the positive behaviour. So if your child is doing well and they're progressing through, then reward this behaviour. Offering a small pudding, even if your main meal is refused. So this is to avoid the puddings being a special food, a reward, so it should just be included in the day. Be patient and don't panic, don't get upset and cross. We want you to keep going and make this child-led. So don't panic. Keep calm. We've also talked about purchasing an age-appropriate multivitamin and mineral supplement while your child's diet might be a little bit limited. But if your supplement doesn't include a vitamin D, then you might require a separate vitamin C supplement. And I said, importantly, just keep going. So we have come to the end of our webinar now. So if you wouldn't mind completing the post-webinar survey, we would be very, very grateful. Click on the complete post-webinar survey on the website. And we'd just like to say thank you for listening.